Welcome into the Locked On Knicks podcast. Gavin, Shaw, Alex Wolf. Today, we are joined by a very special guest from the Great White North. It's Sean Woodley, the host of Locked On Raptors. Alex, 3 matchups between the Knicks and Raptors over the next 2+ weeks. So why not talk to our buddy?
Yeah, and we get the skinny on the Raptors. You know, what's gone into their somewhat tumultuous season so far? What's not working? What is working? What players might they want to trade? What players might they not want to trade? Will Nick Nurse survive the year? And then, of course, we preview the matchups coming up and just kind of, just shoot the crap a little bit about what's coming up with the Knicks and Raptors here. So that's all next on Locked On Knicks.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. We want to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day. If you didn't know, well, now you do. We are available on all platforms, including on YouTube. So go check us out there. See our smiling faces, enjoying this 3-game winning streak. But whose smiling faces will you be looking at? I'm Gavin Shaw, a play-by-play broadcaster, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster. Thanks for that one. Alex, he is Alex Wolf, the editor-in-chief of the Strickland, the greatest Knicks website in the whole wide world. And once again, we are about to be joined by Sean Woodley to break down what is wrong in Raptorsville and preview the team's 3 upcoming matchups between tonight and January 22nd. It is going to shape Toronto's season. It might just shape New York season. We'll tell you how they're going to go right now on Locked On Knicks. All right, as promised, we are joined by the host of Locked On Raptors, Sean Woodley, my second favorite Canadian. I'm not making that mistake again. Sean, how's it going? Good to have you back. I know it was, we were talking about a little pre-show, a tough one for your Raptors last night. So you could start off there. You could go bigger picture, but there's only one place to open this podcast. What is wrong with the Toronto Raptors, a team that a dark horse title contender would have been strong, but could I say like crowd favorite, like aesthetically pleasing, like team that everyone was in on this preseason. Now 16-22, 4th worst record in the Eastern Conference, far closer to last place than first place. What is up in Toronto, Sean Woodley?
Oh, how long do you guys have? I know we have a set amount of time here in our Locked On format, but we could go on for days about this. This is the difficult thing, is there's no one thing that's wrong with the Toronto Raptors. Their defense, not super great right now. They're seeing a lot of rough perimeter defense. Fred VanVleet in particular has seen a bit of a drop-off in what used to be his greatest skill as a defender, as just an on-ball guy. That's kind of dissipated a little bit. You have a very complex scheme and not really the proper set of players to execute it necessarily. Precious Achiuwa, for example, really important part of last year's close to the season, where the Raptors were the second best team in the league outside of the Celtics to close the season, or at least in the Eastern Conference. And Achiuwa was awesome during that time. He was hitting threes. He was playing incredible defense. He missed 24 games with an ankle injury. He's looked kind of rough in his first couple games since coming back. And he kind of is the straw that stirs the drink with the defense when all things are equal. And so they missed him. Scotty Barnes has regressed on defense. And the problem with all of these defensive issues is the Raptors' offense typically thrives when the defense is getting stops, turning the other team over, and getting it on the run, because their half-court offense kind of sucks. The half-court offense kind of sucks because there's no shooting whatsoever, and the best shooters on the team, Gary Trent Jr., Fred VanVleet, OG Anunoby, 2 of those guys, OG and Trent, are kind of coming back to earth a little bit, but those 3 guys have had outlier, really bad seasons from 3, their worst career seasons in most cases. So it's just a lot of stuff happening. The bench has not been what it was hoped it was going to be. Chris Boucher's taken a step back after he was a fringy, sort of sexy 6th Man of the Year candidate last year. Again, I mentioned the Achiuwa injury. That's been big. They have gotten nothing out of their 29th overall pick back in 2020 and Malachi Flynn. Desmond Bane, the pick after him, drives me crazy every single time he does Desmond Bane things. And you had Otto Porter Jr., who was just starting games in the finals 6 months ago for the Warriors, who was supposed to be a big addition, who, in theory, saw solves a lot of the defense and three-point shooting problems because he's good at defense and three-point shooting. And he's played 8 games because he had a hamstring injury and now has a dislocated toe that apparently is just not healing whatsoever. And so you get all of that, plus you have Nick Nurse maybe being a little bit staunch in the way he runs the team, the schemes kind of refusing to change things up based on the personnel. The front office came into the season banking on internal development being the big sort of engine that would drive the improvement. The internal development hasn't really happened as fast as they would have hoped. And you have the best players on the team having to play like 41 minutes a night just to stay in games, and they're burning out at the end of games. They're losing the rope. And so it's all these little things coming into one kind of noxious stew that Raptors fans are very angry about. I probably like a less of a sort of the sky is falling approach than most, but it's not pretty right now, man. And it's a very loaded question to ask what's wrong with the Raptors, because the answer is kind of everything.
Yeah. First off, 41 minutes a game. Tom Thibodeau calls that another day at the office.
Yeah, Tom Thibodeau and Nick Nurse are little sickos who just feel like they're trying to one up one another with how much can we burn out our players, huh? It's like they have like a bet going on or something. 2
sickos on the hot seat all year that are just clinging on by a thread, it seems like. I'm just going to dive right in because this is something that's, obviously the unofficial start to trade season was December 15th, and things have been weirdly quiet on that front. No trades have commenced yet, which seems a little odd.
Whoa, Alex. Noah Vonleh was traded to the Spurs today. All right.
Yeah, come on now.
Calm down here.
How dare you disrespect cash considerations like that? Unbelievable.
Nick's legend.
Quad King Noah Vonleh. Yeah, that's true. All right, never mind. I stand corrected. But the trade season hasn't really opened up yet. First off, would the Raptors be interested in trading OG Anunoby to the Knicks for a bag of chips? Because I think that he would be great on the Knicks. But no, really, though, I'm kind of curious, and we could sort of get into the games between these teams and what they might mean for both of them as far as, how they might approach things going through the end of the year here, as my cat is trying to get to my microphone. But basically, where do you see the team going as things stand right now? I know there's a lot of talk about potentially the coach being ousted, in Nick Nurse. There's talk in potentially trading some guys off or something if things continue to go poorly. But then you have like a Pascal Siakam who, similar to the Knicks with Julius Randle, is having a really fantastic year. And that kind of complicates things. I mean, I don't know. I feel like it's a very weird question to answer right now.
Yeah.
Given where the Raptors are, given what expectations were, and just the composition of their roster and stuff. But like, where do you see this going right now?
Yeah, it's tough because I could see it going a whole bunch of different ways, from them saying, hey, this is kind of a lost season, but we believe in sort of the main guys we have on the team. And the issue here is with roster spots 6 through 15, not 1 through 5. So let's address that in the offseason in a way that we didn't last offseason. You get a first-round pick thrown into the mix, all of that, that could be the way they go if they don't get what they want for some of their guys. I can tell you for sure, Pascal Siakam ain't getting traded. That is, like, you don't trade top 12 players in the NBA, which is what Pascal Siakam has been this season. He was an All-NBA player last season. He's been an All-NBA player 2 of the last 3 seasons, and if things go right this year, 3 out of 4, he's awesome. Knicks fans don't need me to tell them that. You saw what Pascal Siakam did in your own barn a couple weeks ago. He's amazing, and he is like the reason that you feel hopeful that things can turn around quickly here for the Raptors. And really, the philosophy should be, how do we recenter this thing and maximize Pascal Siakam's prime? He's 28 years old. He's up for an extension, potentially Supermax if he makes All-NBA this offseason. I would imagine the Raptors are going to lock him up through his age 33 season, and they're going to be totally fine with that because he's a dude who's probably going to age quite well as someone who's based on footwork and feel and craft, less so dunking in your face every time down the floor. And so Pascal ain't getting traded. I can pretty much guarantee you that. I also don't think you'll see Scotty Barnes get traded unless it's like a massive super duper star trade that comes along. And does Kevin Durant ask for a trade again? Does that get something that gets revisited if the Nets fall apart at some point here when Kyrie inevitably does something insane? Who's to say? But I don't think Scotty Barnes gets dealt, and I really don't see OG Anunoby getting dealt either. He's the kind of player that literally every team in the league would want, and to me, that suggests maybe you should keep that player on your own team if that's the kind of player he is. He really, to me, is the type of player who, if you trade OG Anunoby, you're going to spend the next 20 years being like, man, wouldn't it be cool if you had a guy like OG Anunoby playing the wing for your team? He's a very rare type of player who can score 20 a game while also being the best wing defender alive on any given night. I don't see him getting moved unless it's for, I know Zach Lowe kind of mentioned, does he, garner the Donovan Mitchell package? If the Knicks want to pony that up, then hey, maybe there's a conversation to be had. I just don't see any team out there putting up the Donovan Mitchell package for OG Anunoby. That would be pretty stupid because as great as OG is, he's not going to be your best player or anything like that. So the whole point of this Raptors season has been, or sort of, I think coming in, the stated goal was, all right, let's find out who the guys are for the Scotty Barnes, Pascal Siakam era as we try to have Siakam through his prime as Barnes ages into his. And those three guys are the three ironclad. They're going to be part of the team. You build a team with those three wings and you are in pretty good shape as sort of a starting point. Where it gets interesting is Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., and Chris Boucher. To me, they're Boucher is sort of, he's not a pending free agent, but he's got one of those very movable $13 million a year contracts. Could easily see him swapped out just to try to change the bench mix because the bench mix has not worked. And then Fred VanVleet, Gary Trent Jr., both have player options this offseason. Both would presumably opt out and try to cash in. And I think the next month here is going to be about the Raptors deciding whether or not they want to be the team to pay those guys their next contracts. I'm coming a little more around on the idea that Gary Trent Jr. might stay. He's played really well of late. He fits perfectly, in theory, with those other three core guys as a guy who's just like a trigger man, who's unconscious, who can finish off plays for you, and notably shoot threes on a team that doesn't have a whole lot of that. VanVleet is where it gets super interesting. Now that Jalen Brunson is on the Knicks, I can't imagine they'd be interested there. But that, I think, is sort of the inflection point for me. And actually, my podcast on Friday on Locked On Raptors is a full deep dive on whether or not the Raptors should trade Fred. There's arguments for, arguments against. He's had a really bad season by his standards, three-point shooting-wise in particular. The defense I mentioned too, the question is, how real is this decline? Is it actually the beginning of the end for a 28-year-old who's 5'11", or is just like a really poorly timed slump that is complicating the picture for the Raptors here? It's really hard to say, and I don't know if the Raptors are going to rush to make a decision on either of those guys. Earlier, a couple of weeks ago, I might have said, hey, the Raptors are still in the mix to go trade their first-round pick to add to the team right now. It feels like maybe at 16 and 22 at the time of recording, that's maybe not the smartest or wisest move. I don't think they're going to outwardly tank this season, but I don't think they'll be all that upset if they just stand pat at the deadline and they just happen to get the 9th overall pick or something like that. I think they'd be fine with that as well. They'd also be fine with getting into the play-in and getting the sort of reps and the high leverage game experience that you like to see from that too. So it's tricky. It really is not a whole lot to sort of determine which direction they're going to go, but I do think the sort of reports out there about the Raptors being the team that might set the market for the deadline are pretty on point because they have a lot of really interesting guys. And if a team comes in, sort of with that contender fever thinking Fred VanVleet's the last guy to put us over the top, maybe they can get themselves an offer that makes them comfortable moving on from a guy who's been kind of the face of their franchise for the last few years.
All right, we'll be right back in with Sean. We're going to talk some about like Scotty Barnes and Nick Nurse, all the striking similarities between Nick Nurse and Tom Thibodeau. But first, I got to remind you guys that today's episode is brought to you by Built Bar. If you're looking for a delicious treat, but you don't want all the fat and calories, you got to try a Built Bar. We just got through the holidays. My goal this year, New Year's resolution, I really do mean this. I put on a little bit of weight last year. I'm trying to eat healthy. I'm trying to, not have huge portions and trying to just ingest protein when I need it and leave out all of the other things that I enjoy. So maybe not have my protein come from like a slice of pizza with the cheese on it. Maybe, just have a Built Bar now and again, because the best thing about Built Bars is that they taste fantastic, but they're good for you. And now the best part is we used to always send you to built.com. And, then you'd have to order it and wait around and it would be like, ugh, what am I going to do for these like 3 days before I get my Built Bar? Great news. You don't have to do that anymore, although you can still order from built.com. But now you can also get them at your local Walmart or Sam's Club. That's right. Head to your nearest Walmart today. Walk to the pharmacy section and grab yourself a box of Built Bars. You can pick up a 4-bar box of cookies and cream, double chocolate, or coconut puffs. And if you're close to a Sam's Club run, you can grab a 13-bar box with hit flavors brownie batter and churro. You can thank me later. So definitely check that out. Head to your local Walmart or Sam's Club today and get yourself some Built Bars.
Has anything that has happened this season changed your perception of who and what Scottie Barnes can eventually be? Because obviously he was the name du jour in the theoretical Kevin Durant trade this offseason. And I assume, given that Durant is having an MVP type of season, arguably the most efficient season of his career. And there's a world where as bad as things are going in Toronto, you swap out Barnes and maybe 2 more of those pieces, like whether it was Trent, OG obviously would make for a substantial loss, but just the idea of basically just Durant and Siakam and a bunch of long dudes that can fly around and Fred VanVleet orchestrating it, at least to me, that still sounds like it could be a championship contender right now. And I guess I asked that question both about Scottie Barnes specifically and also just sort of as a microcosm of the Raptors' greater philosophy where they wanted to be like this. You guys used the term sickos in a different context before, but a bunch of like a super weird team, right? Like ultra long, ultra switchable, and they've basically now, like since the Kawhi era, kind of been like pushing the boundaries of like what modern basketball looks like with kind of mixed results. And at times it's really, really worked. And at times to your point, like this year, like it feels like they're just like not like great enough in any one specific area. And I feel like Barnes is representative of that in like, all right, you say like OG, someone you want for the next 20 years. Pascal's like a top 15 player. Barnes is the future of the franchise. Like if you're building around all 3 of those guys on paper, it looks incredible, but is there enough spacing? Is there enough shot making there for it to work if that's sort of your 3-man core?
I think if you pair the right players with them, like OG fits with anybody, right? He's a 38% 3-point shooter who defends everybody and can create as like a secondary guy. He's perfect. And Siakam can play on or off the ball. He can be a screener. He can be a short roll guy, while also being the engine of their offense the last couple of seasons, and has done that pretty darn well despite the Raptors' overall struggles. It's more to do, I think, with the supporting cast than anything else. With Barnes, my opinion hasn't really changed on his upside. It's been a weird season for him for sure. There's been some regression, pretty severe regression in a couple of areas. Defensively, I kind of mentioned, although lately he's been playing basically strictly as a 5 on defense, and it's actually working. Like he's had some really, really nice efforts as that sort of last line of defense, the verticality, that type of stuff. And the nice thing about him playing near the rim is he often grabs rebounds and gets to go and do the whole Scottie Barnes, Magic Johnson in the open court thing, which is fun. It's not going the sort of trajectory you love to see, which is straight up, like a lot of these guys who get drafted high, but the peaks are still so impressive to me with Scottie that I'm not concerned about the ultimate end game here. He still very much could be a superstar. Like he could very well be one of the 15 best players in the NBA one day, and I would not be stunned just because the creation is there, the vision is there, the passing's unbelievable, and he's just really freaking strong. And I don't think there's a better example of sort of why I'm not worried about Scottie Barnes in the big picture than the game against the Bucks that was on ESPN on Wednesday night, where he goes through that game. He doesn't score a basket until the 6:45 mark of the fourth quarter, and then he goes 9 for 12 down the stretch, with essentially every bucket coming over top of the presumptive Defensive Player of the Year, Brook Lopez. And Lopez didn't even have a shot because Scottie Barnes was like, all right, my turn to take this game over. It's mine now, and he did it. And he does that a lot in fourth quarters. It's kind of maddening that he doesn't do it all the time, but the peaks are so high with him that I just can't get worried about, is he going to be a bust or something like that? To me, it just feels like a 21-year-old who's never really been all that challenged in his life, finally meeting the adjustment that the NBA's made to him. He's adjusting back, and the alteration of his role to make him more of a 5, more of a short roll guy, a dribble handoff guy on offense has really unlocked him a lot recently, and it's pretty exciting. So those 3 guys, I still think you're pretty happy with going to war as like the core you're building around, with the idea being eventually Barnes ages into being the star while Siakam is still in his mid to late prime. So yeah, those 3 guys, not too worried about. It's just everything else that is completely up in the air.
Yeah, I got to tell you, as Knicks fans, we have no experience with dealing with people trying to label a high draft pick a bust in their early 20s that have shown tons of, potential and have taken over and scored, big games or whatever, and yet, still deal through some inconsistencies and whatever. And, people want to label them a bust after like 2 years.
Yeah, we're the thing is we're all really stupid about how we talk about players, especially when they're young. It's just we're all dumb. It's just it's good to remind yourself. None of us know what the hell we're talking about.
Yeah.
Please listen to our podcasts,
especially if you don't immediately jump on a player having a few bad games and call them a bust. What are you even doing with your life at that point?
All right, guys, we will be back one final time to preview what the Raptors will do at the trade deadline and get into their matchup with the New York Knicks. How will those games go? What factors in the first game will be significant in the ensuing matchups? Will Jalen Brunson get some much-needed revenge? But first, as a small business owner or hiring manager, you know that success in 2023 all depends on the team members you surround yourself with. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. With LinkedIn Jobs, you can hire qualified candidates more efficiently by matching open roles with people who have the skills, values, and experiences to help you achieve your goals. Now, I've never been in the position of hiring on LinkedIn. I've certainly been in the position of being a job hunter on LinkedIn. And I think what is so essential about it is that they guide you to the right people. I've gotten multiple broadcast jobs just off of making a connection, chatting someone up and saying like, hey, do you know about anything here? Or can you tell me a little bit about this? In fact, just today, I messaged someone about an event that I'm possibly going to be doing in a few weeks. LinkedIn Jobs helps you quickly attract qualified candidates to your open jobs with targeting tools. They go beyond resume data by using insights from your job post company and their 875 million, wow, that's a big number, member profiles to put your post in front of the most qualified candidates. Identify the most qualified candidates on LinkedIn Jobs and connect with them fast and for free. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply.
And today's episode is also brought to you by the Knicks and MSG. Yes, indeed. What's up, Knicks Nation? As the new year gets underway, now is the time to start planning your visit to the Mecca of basketball, Madison Square Garden. Start off the new year strong with Knicks basketball because there's still tons of ball to be played. It's a long season, and we got all the way till April for regular season and maybe some postseason after that. Be there to catch the action live and cheer on the Knicks. Knicks fans bring the passion and energy and make it a true home court advantage. And there really is no experience like watching a game at the world's most famous arena. If I may make a recommendation, maybe check out the Chase Bridge. It's one of my favorite places to take in a game. It offers a really unique view that you won't get in any other basketball stadium. If you're an X's and O's type person, it's sort of like having a bird's eye view of the court while things are happening. It's pretty cool. So you need to be there to experience top tier competition at the Mecca of basketball, Madison Square Garden. Get tickets at Knicks.com/lockedon today. That's Knicks.com/lockedon. Anywho, I think the topic I want to get onto next, and I mean, maybe we could close off talking a little bit about the actual games coming up here and some implications for the Knicks and the Raptors, but so many curiosities about the Raptors. I don't know if you know this, Sean. We did this like draft of teams where it was myself and Gavin and one of his buddies who he used to host Locked On Nets with, and we drafted all the teams. And I think with the second pick, I took the Raptors because I was like, I see it. I see the vision.
Alex, I think you might have referenced this last time Sean was on. I'm trying to remember the timeline here, but I'm getting deja vu right now. Yeah,
I don't know if we had Sean on last time before or after that, but regardless, I'll bring it up again because I feel like a fool. I'm going to overreact now and say they're so bad. Why did I do? No, I'm just kidding. But I think just like the Knicks, where Tibbs has been a bit of a lightning rod this year. It seems like Nick Nurse has been a bit of a lightning rod, and they are, I referenced this a couple minutes ago, but they're kind of similar in many ways. They have sort of old school mentalities, and they seem to have like the, like toughen up or get out kind of mentality, and like, don't care about playing their guys super huge minutes if they feel that it's necessary. And, all in all, in many ways, a lot of reporting suggests that they could be sort of difficult to work with sometimes and stuff like that. Do you think that Nick Nurse makes it to the end of the season as Raptors head coach? And I guess maybe the more pertinent question is, do you think he starts next season still as the Raptors coach?
It's hard to say next season just yet. I think we kind of got to see how things progress here, and if things completely fall off the rails and anything's on the table. But my inclination is that, yeah, he'll still be around because, him and the front office are on the same page. I don't think there's any confusion as to what's going on here. I think, that they've all kind of been on the same page with what the theoretical team building model is here, and they're trying something new and different. And Nick Nurse has a pretty high set of standards. And, I think you kind of want that when you're an NBA team, especially when you have high ambitions. You should probably want to hold your guys to a pretty high standard. I do think, there's always the possibility that his sort of messaging and the way he kind of handles himself wears thin on the players. And, maybe it just is, at some point you come to a crossroads where you just kind of need a new voice for the sake of a new voice. I don't know if they're there just yet. Raptors fans will tell you it's time to get rid of them, but Raptors fans, like all fans, we love them. They're sickos. They're lunatics. That's what you're supposed to do, is call for your coach's head when things aren't going well. So I don't begrudge people for doing that necessarily, but I think he's got too much equity with the franchise. I think the other thing that really kind of throws me off too is maybe he's not the greatest at managing 82 games in terms of pacing things out, ensuring all the different players on the roster get some reasonable run to try to get comfortable. He plays a short rotation. It's hard to get into his good graces. It's very easy to fall out of his good graces. Maybe that's not the best way to navigate 82 games, but I do feel as though if you were to get rid of Nick Nurse and find yourself in a playoff game, you're going to regret not having Nick Nurse, because that dude can pull the levers in a playoff game. We've seen it before. We've seen him go box and one on Steph Curry in the playoffs and win a playoff game, a finals game, with a high school defense just because he thought it would work. He's not afraid to be bold. The lineup decisions he's made in series in the past have been really, really on point. In-game adjustments, game-to-game adjustments. And I just think you rue the day you get rid of Nick Nurse. And, a guy who I have on my podcast, Jamar Hines, writes for Raptors Republic. He was on last week, and he made the point. His sort of barometer for should a coach get fired or not is how quickly would another team hire him if he were to be let go. And I have a hunch that if Nick Nurse were to be fired, you'd see like 5 teams just like fire their existing coaches just for the chance at hiring Nick Nurse, which probably suggests that maybe you've got a good guy in your hands to coach your team, with all of the sort of caveats that, yeah, it has not been a good season. It's not gone to plan. Nick Nurse's sort of stubbornness within his schemes probably is something to do with it. He has not really been an offensive innovator necessarily. He's been very defensive focused. The offense has been kind of out of ideas for a couple of years now. He's very read and react. Let the players do the things that they see on the court. Don't draw plays, that type of thing. At some point, though, some structure would be nice, maybe, and I think there's room for leeway, but I think there's also should be room for coaches to improve and grow and adapt to the things that they're not doing so well and make changes, and I think Nick Nurse has shown a capacity for that, so I doubt we'll see a big move in the coaching situation. Middle of next season, if things are still rough, then absolutely, but I still think there's plenty of rope here for Nick Nurse, despite the aggravated nature of the fan base.
Sound familiar, Alex? Minus an NBA title for Tom Thibodeau.
Did you see me laughing throughout that whole part when he's describing, like, yeah, they just, there's no real scheme for the offense. They kind of just do stuff, but the defense is great. I mean, I'm like, wow, that sounds so familiar.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Yeah. Tibbs of the Great North. Yeah. Well, Sean, we'll get to it. Big reason we had you on is the Knicks and Raptors inexplicably play 3 games in the next 16 days. They play tonight in Toronto, January 6th, back in the comfy confines of MSG, and then January 22nd, back in Toronto. An epic matchup between these teams when they matched up about, like 2.5-3 weeks ago now. Pascal Siakam obviously having a career night. The New York Knicks, I would say, honestly, one of their better performances of the season, not in terms of their quality of play, but just in terms of their sheer effort and grittiness, trying to preserve an 8-game winning streak on a night where they just didn't really have it. And Pascal had everything and still almost winning the game. I guess I'll throw that back at you, Sean. Did you leave that game feeling confident, saying like, hey, we have the Knicks number, or more like, oh boy, if they just hit a couple more threes, we could be in trouble? What do you expect over the course of these 3 games against the Knicks?
Yeah, I mean, these games come during maybe the most pivotal stretch the Raptors have had in, years, like dating back to the freaking finals in 2019, really. Like, it's a very critical stretch heading into the trade deadline, and all of the options on the table, like, they're going to get whittled down, I think, based on the results of what we see coming up here. So I'd imagine the Raptors will have at least some urgency for these games, much like they did in that game against the Knicks, where, the Knicks were on the 8-game winning streak. The Raptors were on a 6-game losing streak going into that one. They ended their losing streak there with Siakam just deciding that the losing streak's over now, and I'm stopping it myself, which was great. It's also hard, though, because I keep on expecting that there's a corner this Raptors team's going to turn, because I think on balance, like, the talent on the roster, they're getting healthier. They're not like getting waxed or anything like that. Like, they're basically an even team on the season, slightly below. They're middle of the pack net rating and all this. And I still think, I look at the teams ahead of them, the Wizards, the Bulls, the Hawks, the Knicks, the Pacers. I don't think any of those teams are appreciably better than the Toronto Raptors are at full health. And so I keep on thinking there's like a run here. There's, wins against these teams to help them kind of claw back in the standings, but then they go and lose to the Pacers and stuff like that. So I have no idea what to expect from these games, on a night-to-night basis. I would guess that you're going to get a pretty good effort from them on Friday based on sort of the way the Bucks game finished and just the madness that game entailed, and just the fact that this homestand they're on a 6-game homestand. This will be the second game. This homestand really is make or break. Like, if they don't go 4-2, 5-1 on this homestand, they're already 0-1, then they're probably too far out to even think of a 6 seed as like a realistic, ceiling for the season. I'm still pro playing. I think, it's cool to be in the play-in. It's fun. You get cool memories, all that good stuff. But it's definitely something where, it's like, at some point the Raptors have to turn the corner here. I don't know how to predict if or when that's going to happen. I guess the Knicks offer a pretty good opportunity for it. They've had success against them so far this year. Pascal seems to not really have too many guys on the team who can guard him. So sure, why not? Let's pick the Raptors to win. Guaranteed win night. I don't know. But these next games, you're seeing the Raptors at a very, very interesting time in their arc, and this season in particular.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see. I mean, I actually think if we're just looking at this from the perspective of the Knicks are sort of on their own little revenge tour at the moment. Like, they just beat the Suns, who had waxed them earlier in the season. They beat the Spurs, who just a few days prior had sort of embarrassingly like outclassed them, even though they didn't have Brunson and RJ. Like, I was extremely annoyed with that game from the Knicks because it just seemed like they came out not ready to play. And then, so now they get the Raptors, who, Pascal had that big game against them, and the Knicks will be on the road where they weirdly play better most of the time. At least if this year is any indication. So I think we're in for, this is going to be kind of fun. Like, I have this feeling like with these next 3 games, it feels very like baseball series-esque, even though they're split up by like it's 4 games between
10 days and then 6 days between.
Yeah, so like a little bit of time in between, but that's a lot of exposure to each other in a very short period of time. I think we're gonna see some pretty fun games here. Like, Randall is playing on such a tear lately that I get the feeling it's going to be a lot of anything you can do, I can do better between sure. Him and Pascal for most of this series. And then, Brunson versus Van Vliet, I thought that, I think that the Raptors just present this like really interesting conundrum for the Knicks, because they're sort of like the anti-Knicks, in the sense that other than Van Vliet and Malachi Flynn, they've like drafted and made a completely different team than the Knicks have, where the Knicks are like all these guys that might not necessarily have the physical profiles that leap off the page at you, but just have like all the footwork and all the this, that, the other, all the tricks in their bag. Whereas the Raptors, like, I mean, I know Siakam does have all those things too, but the look and feel of all the guys on their team is just like long defense, like 3-point shooting. Like this is just how we're going to beat you. We're just going to like defend you to death with this unlimited wingspan that we can throw out on the court. I think it's going to be a really intriguing matchup. I don't know. I just like watching these two teams because I think it's very interesting to see how they match up with one another.
Yeah, it's like a styles make fights thing, right? Because, the Raptors, I mean, they're a styles make fights thing against every team because no one's built like the Raptors, except maybe the Magic, who are just like the bigger Raptors. But like, it's especially interesting because, the Mitchell Robinson, Isaiah Hartenstein thing is always, anytime the Raptors come up with a team with just like 48 minutes of solid center play, it becomes an interesting thing because they're not really geared for that. Like, right, they're prone to getting beaten on the glass that way. Sort of beefier dudes could knock around, a Scotty Barnes, who again's kind of playing the nominal 5 right now. I am fascinated to see actually how Barnes performs against a sort of like bouncy athletic center like a Mitchell Robinson, just because he's kind of being tested all again in this sort of new adapted role he's had, and he's been very, very good defensively in that spot. Offensively, again, he went at Brook Lopez a whole bunch in that game against the Bucks and had a lot of success. So if you can do it against Brook, you can do it against anybody. But you run into the issues of the Raptors have trouble scoring from 3. They just have trouble from scoring it from everywhere, really. And if the paint becomes a difficult area for them to access, if there's a wall in the way of Pascal Siakam, that's kind of been the sort of book on how to guard the Raptors lately. I mean, the Bucks were going like the full extreme version on Wednesday. They had like no one guarding anybody. It was just like, all right, we're going to pack into a little ball and someone's going to drive into us. We're going to force them to pass it. And we know the Raptors are going to break a 3. That's just like how it's working. Teams are not giving Scotty Barnes all the room in the world. The last 2 games out against the Pacers and the Bucks, you've seen teams just completely forget about him, keep the center in the middle of the paint. And Scotty's had a lot of room to operate with dribble handoffs and stuff like that. He's not often enough weaponized that space in front of him just to get him going downhill. But he did start to do that in that Bucks game. And I wonder if maybe that's a sign of things to come. So, it's a fascinating thing. The Raptors always present an interesting sort of conundrum. And, this is also a team in the Knicks, not the greatest 3-point shooting team in the world. The Raptors are so prone to getting burned by 3-point shooting when they send extra attention to stars. We saw this in the Grayson Allen game winner in that overtime game on Wednesday. And the Knicks don't have like a classic heliocentric star to send all their attention towards, and they're not necessarily as prone to getting burned by a million threes. We saw zone work really well for the Raptors against the Knicks last time out. I would imagine we'll see a lot of that too as they try to simplify things a little bit on defense with the personnel they have. It's a really interesting tete-a-tete, and the Raptors badly need these games, man. They need to gain some ground on the teams in front of them. They keep on losing to these teams. They play the Hawks later in this homestand too. That's another big one, but this might be the single biggest game on the schedule for the next 5 or so here while they're at home. Raptors Knicks, always a good time.
Yeah, I think you hit on a bunch of good stuff there. Jalen Brunson just 3 for 14 the first game, and the Raptors were the first team this year to really frustrate him to that extent, and it kicked off a run of a couple of poor shooting games for Brunson where they just threw a lot of length and multiple bodies at him, and they basically came in and said, hey, this guy isn't going to beat us. Like if he breaks contain, like someone else who's a foot taller than him with arms that are longer than his torso are just going to be, well, I guess that's normal, and his legs are just going to be sprinting at him over and over again. But then Brunson was able to pivot, and he had 12 assists in that game, and you saw Emmanuel quickly have a great game, you saw RJ Barrett have a great game, you saw Julius Randle have a really good game, and it's because Brunson was just spoon feeding them for easy shot after easy shot. So I like that flexibility for Brunson, but I think he's going to be out for revenge. So it'll be interesting to see how he shoots, how he does. To your point on Mitch, just 3 rebounds in that first matchup for a guy who is leading the NBA in contested rebound percentage. That was kind of a shocking stat. And I wonder if Toronto's able to maintain that. And because they did as good of a job boxing him out and just keeping him away from the rim as any team in the league has. this year. And then just the potential return of Obi Toppin for the Knicks, I think, is really fascinating, because that first Raptors game is what kicked off the duo of Jericho Sims and Isaiah Hartenstein, who were previously over the Knicks 8-game winning streak looking really, really strong together. The Raptors shut them down. Like, I'm looking at the box score now. Hartenstein 1 for 5. Sims didn't take a shot in 10 minutes. They were minus 16, minus 11 respectively, including that game. Up till now, they're combined minus 24 per 100 possessions net rating. So they've been terrible since that game. So I wonder if Obi Toppin, who had an incredible game against the Raptors 10 last year, could kind of provide an X factor for the Knicks. And maybe RJ Barrett in those last two matchups, we'll get a chance to see our favorite Canadian taking on our second favorite Canadians team, Sean Woodley. I can't think of a better note to end on than that. Can you tell all of Knicks Nation where they can find all your great work before we send you off?
Yeah, Locked On Raptors. It's basically where it all goes these days. I do have a Substack newsletter called Post Touches that I've neglected very badly, hoping to get back into the groove this year. But writing's hard. Podcasting's easier. So it's all over Locked On Raptors every day. And like I said, there's a big breakdown of the Fred VanVleet trade or not trade conundrum on today's show. So please go check that out. Also, from the game against the Bucks, if you did not see Raptors Bucks, go watch it, because it was the crazy. I've been watching the Raptors for 25 years. It is the most insane game I've ever seen. Made no sense. It was stupid as hell. But my co-host and I on Thursday, Katie Heindel from the lovely Basketball Feelings newsletter, we attempted to rank what the dumbest thing from the game was, like King of the Hill style. We had a list of like 15 really dumb things that happened, and it ultimately whittled it down to one champion, the dumbest of all the dumb things in the dumbest game that ever happened. Go check those out. It's been a fun week, despite the not so fun results for the Toronto Raptors.
All right. Well, Sean, thanks so much, man. Thanks for coming on, and hopefully some really fun results for the Knicks and not the Raptors coming up. And it'll be okay though. If RJ Barrett ever heals from Luka Doncic's talon slicing his finger off, then you'll get to see the Canada's favorite son in the NBA come and beat the Raptors, hopefully. So.
Sadly, I think that's Shea these days, but RJ's a close
probably is.
third, maybe. Jamal Murray's there too. It's tough, man. It's really tough. But yeah,
Canada's
RJ's up there.
Making a lot of really great basketball players these days, huh?
Yeah, if only we could ever just qualify for a major tournament and not lay eggs against horrible teams like the Czech Republic or Venezuela. Oh, that'd be sweet, but we don't need to do a Sean gets angry about Canada basketball thing on your podcast here. We can save that for another day.
All right, that sounds good. All right, thanks, Sean, and thank you everybody for listening. We'll be back with a recap of that Toronto Raptors New York Knicks game for your weekend. So definitely check that out too. But until next time, thank you all for listening, and we'll talk to you all soon. Peace out.